Have you ever said yes when you really meant no? Maybe you agreed to take on one more project at work, or answered the midnight text when you were exhausted, or kept the peace in a relationship, or stepped out of dinner with your family to answer a phone call, even though these things are wearing you thin. It's tempting to avoid the friction, the conflict, the anxiety that comes with setting limits. But when you don't set boundaries, you end up drained, resentful, and wondering, what happened to my life? Does this sound familiar to you? It is to me, and you're not alone. I'm Andrew Smith. I'm a psychologist. I'm a professor. I'm a relationship expert. I'm the founder of REWIRE. I've spent years helping people build their lives and relationships using values-driven, evidence-based tools. Today, I want to talk about how to set boundaries that protect your time, your energy, your goals, your relationships, and how to do it without guilt. I want to send you or suggest to you that you link in the description of rewirewellness.co to get started with our free plan builder. Relationships, boundary setting, it's tough. And we often get stuck in rigid patterns with other people. They're filled with complex dynamics that seem impossible to shift. That's why we created the REWIRE Plan Builder. It helps you take steps towards meaningful change, to break patterns and help you align better with your deepest values and goals, even in difficult relationships. Our methods, they're backed by scientific research and proven to work. Check out the link in the description to start building a personalized plan today. It's completely free. I really encourage you to take this first step towards stronger, healthier connections and better boundaries. Here are the things I'm going to cover today, today's roadmap. Number one, why boundaries are critical for being healthy. You got to have the why. Number two, boundary skills. I'm going to cover 3 boundary skills. And number 3, the difference between healthy boundaries and estrangement. This is actually a tough but necessary caveat why avoidance, judgment, and unnecessary estrangement are actually masquerading as self-care and what the difference between healthy boundaries and estrangement are. So let's step into part 1, the why. Why do boundaries matter? They're not about shutting people out. They're actually about letting the right people in on a timeline that make your life manageable, healthy, and whole, on terms that are healthy and honest. Boundaries, they protect your most valuable resources, your time, your energy, your relationships. Without them, you risk 2 big things. The first thing that you risk is violating your values, becoming incongruent with who it is that you'd like to be and how you need to and want to be spending your time. This is saying yes to things that take you away from what matters the most to you. And the second thing that you risk is losing yourself. Waking up years later and wondering, what happened? I didn't spend my time with the people or passions that bring me the most joy and meaning. Think of it this way. If I don't set limits on work and friendships, I can't show up fully for my family. The years of my children being young start to slip away from me. And vice versa. Without boundaries in my marriage or in my parenting, my personal health and my friendships pay the price. I need those work relationships and friendships as well as my marriage and my children and my family relationships. Boundaries make it possible for me to live in alignment in all of these different roles and relationships and values that I have. Okay, so let's move into part 2, boundary skills. This is really a 3-step process or a 3-skill process. Here's boundary skill number 1. Clarify your why, and clarify it with the people that you're setting boundaries with. Boundaries start with clarity about your values. Values guide what matters most to you. And if you don't know your why, you'll feel conflicted every time you try to set a limit. For example, if you value being present for your family, but keep saying yes to every late night work request, you're violating your own values. A boundary might sound like this. Look, I'm offline after 6 p.m. to spend time with my family. You're never going to get in touch with me then. Next time you feel overwhelmed, pause and ask yourself, what value am I protecting here? The clarity will help you move from guilt to confidence in setting a boundary. Okay, let's move to boundary skill 2, or step 2 in the boundary process. Communicate the boundary clearly and kindly. Once you know your why, it's time to communicate your boundary clearly and kindly. Boundaries are about honest communication, not punishing or blaming anyone. Use I statements and focus on what you need. Here's a real example from a client of mine. We'll call him Jeff. Jeff and his wife, Kara, they've been married for 12 years. And Jeff's parents have recently moved down the street. What started as a fun way to stay connected and to bring the family closer turned into too much togetherness. Jeff's parents were around constantly, and it started to wear everyone thin. At first, Jeff avoided the hard conversation. He didn't want to hurt his parents, but the resentment started to build, and the stress was spilling over into Jeff and Kara's marriage. Finally, Jeff and Kara got on the same page. They decided to approach the conversation differently, grounded in their values of family connection as well as balance. They sat down with Jeff's parents and said, "We love having you close, and we want this to work for the long term, but we also need a little bit more structure and space so we can keep our time together meaningful. We need a little bit more time with our immediate family, and it's also healthy for you," speaking to his parents, "to spend some time developing your friendships in this new community." At first, Jeff's parents were hurt, but after a short cool-off period, they came around. Jeff and Kara set up one family dinner a month and a weekly afternoon for the grandparents to have one-on-one time with the kids. Everyone had more balance, and the relationship actually grew stronger because of this boundary. The lesson, boundaries, they're not about pushing people away. They're about setting new patterns that honor everyone's needs and the whole kaleidoscope of roles and connections and relationships that we need to maintain. So here's boundary skill 3. Face the discomfort and hold the line. Here's the truth. Setting boundaries comes with short-term discomfort. Setting a boundary often does have some kind of consequence. People push back. You feel anxious. But the discomfort is not a reason to abandon the boundary. If you know your why and you've been able to communicate your boundary clearly and compassionately, then holding the line is the last piece. I tell my clients this all the time. Friction is not failure. It's a sign that you're changing an old pattern. You're going to get a burst of response, maybe from an employer or someone in your relationship, like Jeff and Kara's parents being hurt when that boundary got set. Instead of avoiding that discomfort, let it cue you. Aha, this is a choice point. I can step into my values here. Over time, holding the boundary becomes easier, and the relationships that matter will grow stronger around it. Let's move into part 3, and this is kind of a difficult topic and one that has a lot of nuance to it, but I want to talk about this hard thing. In today's culture, cutting off people is often glorified as self-care. But here's the truth. Avoidance isn't the same thing as a healthy boundary. That's what I see when boundaries masquerade as estrangement. An estrangement, or cutting people off, it's really in most cases about avoidance and not stepping up to the honesty and accountability that are needed to improve difficult relationships. Estrangement really lacks compassion and empathy, although it's sometimes called for. I want you to ask yourself if you made this error in judgment by cutting off folks instead of building better boundaries and better understanding. We're overly fragilized in this, and I think therapists are guiding people in lots of cases to a victimhood mentality and estrangement instead of redemption, boundary setting, healing. Repair is one of the key parts of living this human journey and this human life, and we cut that opportunity off when we estrange ourselves and cut folks off. Yes, there are situations where distance is necessary. Abuse, ongoing harm, these are real things that require cutting folks off sometimes. But so often we walk away to avoid discomfort in a normal spectrum of disagreement. We walk away to avoid discomfort of hard emotions, conflict, anxiety, accountability. We call it a boundary. But what we're really doing is avoiding growth and deeper connection. So healthy boundaries, they require courage. They allow you to say, I care about this relationship, but I need to look at it a little bit differently. They invite connection, repair, and honesty, not distance and judgment. So in conclusion, here's what I've covered today. Why boundaries matter for protecting your time, energy, and values, how to set boundaries clearly and kindly even when it's hard, and why avoidance or estrangement usually isn't self-care. Real boundaries build healthier, deeper connections. And again, the caveat there is that there really are abusive relationships that we need to completely distance ourselves from. I'm not talking about those relationships. If you're ready to start improving your relationships now, download our free guide at rewirewellness.co. Go to our free plan builder to step-by-step plan to set healthy boundaries, for example, and reclaim your time and energy. Also, stay tuned. Next up, we'll dive into practical tools for building empathy, mindfulness, and trust in your relationships. This is a video series that we're looking at some of these skills around boundaries included. So, healthy relationships, remember, they're not about perfection. They're about courage, boundaries, and showing up for the people who matter most in ways that align with who we'd like to be. Thanks for watching. If this helped, hit subscribe, hit like, share it with someone who needs it, who needs some hope, who needs some deeper connection. See you next time.